I'd now like to invite Matthew Warren from Enpec to talk to us about the challenge of decarbonising the national energy market. Bit of a hot topic. Matthew is a principal at Boardroom Energy. Matthew has been the Chief Executive of the Australian Energy Council, Energy Supply Association of Australia, and the Clean Energy Council. He was also the Environment Writer for The Australian and has worked for the New South Wales Minerals Council. A professional journalist and economist, he is a regular contributor on energy policy and climate change for the Australian Financial Review and is the author of Wakely nominated book Blackout: How Energy Rich Australia is Running Out of Energy.
Yeah.
Ooh, meaty. Yeah. So whilst we wait for slides to go up, we're pleased to make Matthew welcome.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. I'll be as brief as I can, covering the future of the national electricity market in 10 minutes. Shouldn't be a problem. So I'm just looking. I'm not sort of invested in the debate about nuclear for or against it. I ran the Clean Energy Council back when we got the renewable energy target legislated, so I know what I think Ted said this morning is accurate. That you if you're serious about getting serious energy policy reform in Australia, you need bipartisan support. And so if you want to consider nuclear as an option in Australia, that's the goal. I'm not sure we're getting there with the current debate, but I think it's been useful to raise nuclear. There's only two clean energy engines in the world, that's renewables and nuclear right now. So hydrogen's only a vector, everything else is just a vector. So there is no question in my mind that there is an absolutely inevitable nuclear renaissance in the Northern Hemisphere and most countries this century just out of necessity with climate change. Australia may be an outlier, but we'll discuss that in a second. All right. So look, cutting to the chase, there are three things a grid needs. I mean, obviously, in terms of the generation, it needs reliability, which is you've got to keep, it's a live matching demand and supply process. That can, that has been done with renewables and can be done. And that's probably the least of the challenges that's actively discussed. So that's what politicians think about. The second is power quality, and this is a challenge. So power quality is frequency control, system strength, inertia, the things that large, heavy mass power stations did without even no one noticing in the 20th century, but which we have to replace if you're going to use modular renewables as your core engine. And the third is energy security. Now, Australians have no relationship with the concept of energy security because they've never considered it. If you ask the Japanese, their energy system lives, eats, and breathes energy security. When the Russians invaded Ukraine, everyone discovered Japan had years of gas stored away because they are just, they don't have any natural resources, so that's what they do. Now, the challenge for our grid, if you're going to run a heavy renewables grid, is the risk of future energy droughts. And we've already seen, this isn't a theoretical concept, this is sort of being modelled now. It was a wind drought in Europe in 2021 that triggered the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We've experienced a wind drought here in Australia in the second quarter of this year. And we've seen it, if you see on the charts, I'll show you, coal has increased its output this year as a result of that wind drought. So they will happen, they're guaranteed to occur, and managing that energy security is a really big challenge that's not even on the radar yet with the energy system. So the first thing is we need new capacity now. The opposition is talking about holding renewables and waiting till we build nuclear. That is not an option. That is not an option. And the reason is this is a chart that shows you this is basically the stack of coal generators when they hit 50 years. Now that's an arbitrary measure, but at around 50 years is when a coal generator is at the end of its life. Every coal generator is different. They're like cars, they've been flogged at various points throughout their lives. Some will go over, some won't make it. But you do not want to be sweating a heap of coal generators at the end of their life. The one I would probably say that concerns me the most is your lawn in Victoria, because that one is the tiredest, whereas you've got Araring here in New South Wales and Vales Point are actually doing quite well for their age. But the older they get, it's like driving a Commodore to work every day. You can do it, but the cost of maintaining it and the reliability of it gets harder and as they get older. Energy Australia, which owns your lawn, spent $400 million updating it last year, and it's supposed to close in 4 years' time. So that gives you some idea of that sort of, this is a system under stress. It needs extra capacity, it needs renewables, it needs gas, it needs batteries, it needs the suite of replacement technologies to go in. And in the case of Araring, it also needs power quality services. Oh, have we got the... Okay, I think we've got the wrong slides. Okay, it's just, so rooftop solar. Rooftop solar is now the biggest. This is just noting the rooftop solar is now easily the biggest generator in the country. It's at 22 gigawatts. I'm responsible for it, so I'm sorry, but it's incredibly. I mean, it's incredibly popular. It's because it saves households money. It's not that rooftop solar is a bad idea. It's that we're building rooftop systems that are far too big. They're way beyond domestic demand, so they're basically crowding out all the generation through the middle of the day. And because of their popularity, they're incredibly popular with retirees and people approaching retirement and households who are price sensitive. So they're very popular in marginal electorates. And I did that. So that means governments will not stop rooftop solar, but it's become a real problem for grid management. AGL is now trialling, and this is significant, they're trialling turning off Bayswater coal-fired power station through the middle of the day. So given that coal and nuclear generators are pretty much the same machine with a different heat source, they've worked out they think they can turn that coal generator off during the solar peaks, and they burn a bit of coal to keep the boiler hot so that it doesn't deteriorate, and then they bring it back on in the evening. It's cheaper for them than losing money by generating at negative prices during the middle of the day. South Australia is the world leader in integrating renewables, and it works. Okay, works with conditions. So it's a glimpse of the future. If you're going to run pure renewables, that's what it's going to look like. The yellow is solar, the green is wind. Then the pinky bits are gas generators jumping in and out, and the big purple bit is imports from Victoria. So that's like a gigantic battery. So it works, but it's very volatile. South Australia has been operating like this now for a few years. Providing it remains connected to the eastern states, it's okay, it works. You'll notice you'll note that if you look across that chart, you can see at the bottom, there's always a little bit of pink, there's always a bit of gas on. That's because in order to maintain power quality, to maintain the frequency wave in South Australia, there are 2 units of the big heavy gas generators that are always on. So there's never 100% pure, in pure terms, there's never 100% renewables in South Australia because you need something with big rotating mass to create the frequency wave. There are 4 synchronous condensers in South Australia. They can augment that wave, but that wave is needed so that the inverters, the asynchronous generation from the wind and the solar can follow that waveform. So that is the power, they're managing the power quality. So, that's kind of a fairly simple but effective way of managing that power quality form in South Australia. If you keep some thermal generation running, then you can manage it. Okay, it's the wrong slides. Okay, doesn't matter. What we are going to be building now is what is on the list. It's wind and solar. That's been held up by infrastructure constraints, just building the transmission lines, getting them approved. The integrated system plan, which is the thing that's waved around, is not the singular plan for the electricity system. It's a transmission plan. It's basically, AEMO has said, okay, if we're going to need all this renewables, we've got to connect it. So they've planned out what's the most efficient way of rolling out transmission lines to be able to connect these gigawatts of renewable generation. That's all the ISP is. Others turned it into this is the only way forwards. That's not true. It is a transmission plan, and frankly, we will be using this plan because it's probably a reasonably smart way of rolling out the transmission to connect those generators. Rooftop solar PV will keep going because no government will stand in its way. I mean, ideally, you would have kind of regulatory standards that if you go above, say, 5 kilowatts for a household, it has to have a battery. but that won't happen. So in retiree suburbs, it's quite common for households to have 12, 15, even 20 kilowatts of rooftop solar, which is just gigantic, with no battery. It will keep going. Gas peakers and storage. Gas will be absolutely essential because you cannot, the renewables do not run all the time, and you need something flexible to jump in and out. So gas peakers will be essential. They're cheap to build. They're sort of expensive to run, but they, as you can see from that chart, they sort of don't run too much. They jump in and out. They're absolutely essential for reliability. Pumped hydro is deep storage. The story around storage is important. Deep storage is really useful. It'll help you it acts like a second generator, so that makes sense. It's proving to be expensive. I think we've all tracked Snowy 2.0. That's proving to be much more expensive and harder to deliver. It'll be there for 150 years when it's finished, so it's probably worth building. And it will act as a peaker. So under any conditions, if we ended up with a pure nuclear grid in the second half of this century, we'll still use Snowy as a peaker, and in the same way, those from Queensland, Ivanhoe pumped hydro in Queensland was built by that stalwart of the environment movement, Joba Jockey Peterson, and that was built in the days before they had gas to provide peaking power for a very coal-based generation system, as air conditioners began to penetrate in large numbers in Queensland. So pumped hydro and batteries will be useful almost under any system because they'll provide that sort of dynamic response. Grid batteries are amazing technology. They're dynamic, they're really quick responders, and they're perfectly matched to renewables, but they're not very big. And you cannot build enough storage to manage a system with all the potential future risks just using batteries and pumped hydro. It will empty. And what there's been modelling is a guy called Paul Simshauser, who's probably one of the leading economists. They did a paper about 3 months ago, and he just back modelled the weather on if we had pure renewables and the storage as prescribed, and the storage empties every 2 or 3 or 5. It's stochastic because invariably you get a wind drought or a solar drought. You get a combination of weather conditions. Winter is the worst, and under those conditions, no matter how much storage you've got, it's gone. So that's where you need different sources of energy coming into the system and providing energy security. And that's why we need gas in the short term, and gas will do that job. But if you're serious about getting to net zero, you're probably going to be looking at other zero emissions sources of energy security in the future. And that may be a role for nuclear. And then we're also going to need synchronous condensers. There's the Eraring Power Station in New South Wales, which famous or sort of is highly publicised because it was scheduled to close in 2025, and there's been agreement it won't close. It won't close because one, there isn't yet the renewables and the gas peakers to replace its reliability capacity, and secondly because they also haven't built the synchronous condensers and the other technologies to replace its power quality services. So there's some work done by the transmission business, Transgrid. I think they're looking at 22 syncons to provide some of the power quality services, but some of it's speculative. They're still not quite sure how to replace those services. Voltage control is going to be challenging, and there's work on that right now. So that, bam. Okay. Look, basically, just for what it's worth, gas. With talk of electricity prices, pretty much gas sets the electricity price, and it always has because it's the marginal price setter, and it will for the foreseeable future. So whenever you see people kind of arguing about electricity prices, it's not because of renewables or not renewables. It's because if the price of gas goes up, then the price of electricity tracks it, and that's because at the marginal generator is always the price setter, and everyone's bidding off what it costs the gas peakers to come online. So they're pricing accordingly. All the hydro prices on gas, that's the benchmark price around which the market operates. Okay, synchronous condenser. This just FYI, this is what a synchronous condenser is. They're basically gigantic flywheels that use electricity to create that rotating mass to provide. What we're doing is effectively replicating the physical properties of a large thermal generator. And it may be that we can do that without having to have large rotating mass and thermal generators, but that's kind of a work in progress at the moment. Okay, so nuclear. I mean, the thing about this, I updated my slides. We've got the wrong ones. I'll just work quickly. Is energy security is about the long game. So as we build more renewables and we start exiting these coal generators, there will be these the risk of these renewable droughts and their impact increases. Now, energy security is about finding sources of energy that can come in and replace, can fill those gaps. It will be gas in the short to medium term, and there will need to be work done on what other sources can do it. But that really is a question, an open-ended question, and a role that nuclear can play in the future. The thing about energy policy in Australia is the federal government can make all the promises they like, but it's run by the states. The states are in charge of planning and they're in charge of energy policy. The federal government cannot, they can show you a map. The opposition can put a map with 7 dots on it and say, this is what we're going to do. They cannot deliver that. They have no jurisdiction. It's a state-based policy and it will be delivered by the states. Now, they can negotiate with the states. If you want to get anything built in energy in Australia, you need bipartisan support and you need the states. So that's the political impasse that we face at the moment, is that's to get anything built, that's required. With renewables, we spent a lot of time to get the RET passed. We got bipartisan support. That's why it's done the job it's done. That's why renewables are away to the races, because it's got a locked in and endured commitment to that energy plan. And that's what nuclear will need in the long game if it's going to participate in the grid. Nuclear is not on the horizon. In terms of what the market is anticipating, nuclear is not, it's not in the planning, not for any other reason than it's illegal. And so when AEMO does any of its planning and formal forecasting, it formally rules nuclear out because it's not even allowed to be built. But that's not to say they don't think whether it's good or bad. It's ruled out for those functional reasons. But you need to change that if you are going to sort of start thinking about nuclear into this in the long game. And bearing in mind the other factor with renewables is, like a nuclear generator in the UK, I think they're planning, Hinkley is planning to run for 80 years and 60 years. And so they're long life assets. Snowy will run for as long as that thing holds together, for a couple of 100 years. Wind and solar, these are 20-year assets at best. So they're going to be constantly replaced and upgraded, and the opportunity to modify and improve and change the energy system will change more frequently because they're shorter lived assets. So this debate isn't over in 2035. This debate runs for the rest of this century. And as nuclear changes and devolves in the Northern Hemisphere and other places, that may change the discussion in Australia as well. What you need for nuclear in Australia, I think nuclear can provide, if others can't, you can provide solutions on power quality and energy security. That's self-evident. And the opposition's sort of you will build them logically in the sites of the existing coal generators. What you need is broad-based support across the jurisdiction, across governments, because these are long, just to build them takes 15 years. If you think you've got a coalition government in a state that will get you a power station built and they lose office halfway through, that's gone. I mean, if it's polarized, you will not get these assets across the line. So you have to change the mindset on nuclear, and I know you know this, but that's not, at the moment, the polarized nature of this debate is unhelpful to actually prosecuting a genuine engineering solution. And you need some time. Thank you.